At the birth of the Roman Empire in the 1st century BCE, Virgil composed an epic poem called the Aeneid, where he assigned legendary Trojan origins to his fellow Romans. Romulus and Remus became descendants of Aeneas, a legendary prince of Dardanos who managed to survive the destruction of Troy and migrate to Italy. But who were really the Dardanoi, the celebrated allies and relatives of the royal house of Troy? In this video, we go through the story of the famed Dardanians and their city of Dardanos. The ancient city of Dardanos was located to the north of Troy, lying on the Dardanelles, the namesake strait that separates Asia from Europe. In the Bronze Age, it was inhabited by the Dardanians, a people that would be immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Likewise, most of the information available on the Dardanoi comes from the legendary accounts of Greek mythology. There, the whole region of Troad was originally known as Teucria, after King Teucer or Teucros. Teucer arrived from either Crete or Attica, depending on the source, and settled in northwest Asia Minor, where he founded his kingdom, with his capital city probably being the town of Hamaxitos. Likewise, his successor would also come from Greece. From the Peloponnesian region of Arcadia, a prince named Dardanus sailed to Asia, eventually arriving to the realm of Teucer, where he was welcomed by the king. Dardanus then married Teucer's daughter Bateia, and eventually succeeded Teucer as the new king. He then founded his own capital, which he named Dardanos after himself. The whole kingdom became known as Dardania. The couple had several children, including Elos and Erichthonius. Elos succeeded his father on the Dardanian throne and reportedly reigned for many years. However, he died childless, and thus the throne was succeeded by his brother, Erichthonius. According to Homer, Dardanos had a son, King Erichthonius, who was the wealthiest of all men living. He had 3,000 mares that fed by the water meadows, they and their foals with them. Erichthonius begat Tros, king of the Trojans, and Tros had 3 noble sons, Elos, Assaracus, and Ganymede. Subsequently, just like his father, King Tros named the land after himself, and likewise his people became known as the Trojans. It would only be during and after the reign of King Tros that any real distinction between Trojans and Dardanians came to exist. Tros's son Elos II was chosen as the successor. It was this Elos that founded the city of Ilion, better known as Troy. Upon succeeding his father, Elos remained at his city, which thus became the capital of the Trojans. As for the city of Dardanos, it continued to serve as somewhat of a secondary capital of the realm. It was bestowed to Elos's younger brother Assaracus, who headed the junior branch of the family. The land of Dardania thus became restricted to a much smaller territory surrounding the city of Dardanos itself. Mythology has it that Assaracus married Heromneme, a daughter of a river deity Simois. Upon his death, Assaracus was prominently buried at Troy, close to the temple of Athena. In Dardanos, he was succeeded by his son Capys. He married his cousin Themiste, daughter of King Elos of Troy. Elos's son Laomedon eventually succeeded the throne and became the new king of Troy. Mythological accounts are rather vague on how long exactly Capys ruled. He had 2 sons, Anchises and Acoetes. Anchises was in turn father of the famed Aeneas, while Acoetes fathered Laocoon, a renowned Trojan priest. In Troy, Laomedon was eventually slain during the expedition of legendary Heracles and succeeded by his son Priam. It would be during Priam's reign that the Trojan War took place, where the Achaean coalition under Agamemnon landed at the shores of Troy with over 1,000 ships in their quest to turn Ilion to ashes. The Dardanians formed one of the 5 contingents within the Trojan army and were led by Prince Aeneas and his cousins, Archilochus and Acamas. Overall, the Trojan defense was led by Priam's eldest son and crown prince of Troy, Hector. However, the fate of Troy had unfortunately already been sealed, and there was nothing that their Dardanian cousins could do. As Achaeans inevitably burned Ilion to the ground, Dardanian leaders Archilochus and Acamas both fell in battle. Aeneas, on the other hand, was among the very few survivors that ultimately managed to escape destruction of Troy. His ultimate fate was unknown until it was revised many centuries later when the Romans assumed their own place in Greek mythology and decided to expand on it. Aeneas thus became the ancestor of legendary kings of Alba Longa in Italy, who were in turn ancestors of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. Besides Greco-Roman mythology, not much is known about the actual Dardanians of the Bronze Age. The ethnic identity and language of the people of Dardanos have not been fully determined. The material evidence of the Bronze Age sites show potential ties with Luvian and other Anatolian groups, but also with Thracians who lived nearby just across the Strait of the Dardanelles. Connection with the Greeks is also evidently made by the mythological accounts. It is also worth mentioning that some of the historical Bronze Age rulers of the nearby Troy, known as Velusa, show Hellenic etymology. Most notably, the recorded Velusan king of the early 13th century BCE, Alexandru, appears to be Hittite rendering of the Greek name, Alexander. The Hittites also recorded a god of Velusa, which they called Apollonius, a rendering of god Apollo, the prominent deity of the Trojans. Some ancient writers further made an Illyrian connection, specifically with the Illyrian tribe of the same name, the Dardanians, who lived to the north of the regions of Macedon and Paeonia. Although generally an Illyrian tribe, the classical Dardanoi did have certain Thracian features and inhabited a territory that was a part of the so-called Thraco-Illyrian contact zone, named so due to a mix of Thracian and Illyrian cultural elements. However, it is unknown how the Illyrian Dardanians called themselves, for the name Dardanoi being a word that Greeks used to describe them. Illyrians had no historical, cultural, or otherwise archaeological connection to the regions of Troy and Dardanos, which in turn variously show ties to Hellenic, Thracian, Luvian, and possibly even Mysian or Phrygian features. Furthermore, Greek mythology made a clear distinction between the Trojan and Illyrian Dardanians. Dardanians of Troy were descendants of Dardanos of Arcadia, himself a son of Zeus, being given a clear Hellenic origin. The Illyrian Dardanians were in turn named after a different Dardanos, a son of Illyrus, the mythical ancestor of the Illyrian tribes. Whatever the case may be, the city of Dardanos was more than likely under the sway of historical Troy or Velusa. The appearance of Dardanos in the contemporary Bronze Age sources can be traced to an unlikely event, the Battle of Kadesh fought between Egypt and Hittites in 1274 BCE. The Egyptians recorded a rather detailed list of the Hittite allies, among which they mentioned Dardani or Dardania. Dardanians were listed alongside Mysia, Arzawa, Lycia, and other Western Anatolian allies of the Hatti. As the Bronze Age collapse was unfolding throughout the 12th century BCE, many prominent cities and kingdoms were destroyed. Troy met its inevitable end, but so did most of the Mycenaean Greek palace centers and great eastern empires such as that of the Hittites. What happened to Dardanos is unknown. What we do know is that during the subsequent centuries, known as the Greek Dark Ages, the Hellenic groups colonized most of coastal Asia Minor. Dardanos thus emerged as an Aeolian Greek polis. It started minting its own coinage by the 6th century BCE and eventually joined the Delian League led by Athens a century later. In 85 BCE, a peace treaty between Rome and Pontus was signed at Dardanos by Sulla of Rome and Pontian King Mithridates VI. The legacy of ancient Dardanii continued to be variously preserved by both Greeks and Romans, honoring Prince Aeneas and memory of all the legendary Dardanian heroes of the dim past.